The trade war was on until it wasn't. New uncertainty in American agriculture coming from the situation involving trade. Will it result in retaliatory tariffs, or should farmers wait and see and hope the president negotiates better deals?
I'd call it tariff fatigue.
What's clear is it is impacting markets.
He'll change his mind, he'll flip around, and markets will go up, and then they'll go down, and they'll go down, they'll go up.
Straight ahead, we hear perspectives on that. Plus, improving soil health through technology. Years of research is paying off. And Elon Musk's efforts on government spending hit Nebraska programs dedicated to global agriculture. That and much more. It's time to grow. Are we on the precipice of a trade war? Thanks for joining us on NTV's Grow. I'm Steve White. That trade war seemed to be on, and then it was off. Headlines can just about give you whiplash. Look at the last week as President Trump announced tariffs on Canada and Mexico, then announced they were on hold. What does that mean for you in terms of marketing decisions at the farm level? Susan Littlefield of the Rural Radio Network spoke with Sean Hackett of Hackett Financial Advisors.
Yeah, absolutely. We saw this during his first presidency that, he'll change his mind, he'll flip around, and markets will go up, and then they'll go down, and they'll go down, they'll go up. The best way to manage this, Susan, is if you're a producer and you need to make some sales and we get a big surge on a headline, look to take advantage of that. And the same thing if we get a headline that's negative and we get a big knockdown and you need to be buying physical corn or whatever, use the volatility to your advantage, because we really can't predict from one day to the next what the next headline is going to be. That, to me, is the only way that we can manage it until we get a little better foothold on what the actual longer-term picture is shaping up here for this second term of President Trump's, stint here.
Yeah, I think what's happened in the corn market is we retraced all the way back to where we were in the spring, the May 15th to 19th level, and kind of stalled. So we'll see a little pullback on technical selling, and I'd call it tariff fatigue, Susan.
You talk about this tariff fatigue, and how long do you think this is going to weigh in on what we see in the markets? Is this just going to be a 1 week thing and we'll kind of get used to the idea?
Well, I don't think so. I think it's going to be one of those we're going to shift out and see once what we really have. February 10th, China ramps up the tariffs on the U.S., so we'll see. And then we've got a 30-day pause with Mexico and Canada. So we'll see what happens on that end of it. But we do know one thing, that ultimately, if tariffs, if we do get into a tariff war, it's not a positive, it's usually a negative.
Now, in terms of those tariffs, they were set to go in effect last weekend. However, this past Monday, both Mexico and Canada announced steps that caused the Trump administration to pause tariffs. Now, to be clear, the president's most recent executive order on tariffs puts them on hold, delaying them for 1 month, but did not cancel them entirely. So we could be back again in this scenario soon. Meanwhile, we caught up with Mark McHarg of Nebraska Farm Bureau for his thoughts.
If I need to go buy a car and cars go up by, say, $3,000 because of the tariff, I can wait to buy a car. I can adjust some other things. Agriculture, we can't do that. And we will put a crop in coming this spring in a couple of months. We will have to buy those inputs, and we will have to sell those crops at some point to somebody.
And we're going to hear more from Mark later in the show. For all the talk about what ifs in the arena of trade, it's also important to point out last year was a record one for exports in many categories, as we hear from the U.S. Meat Export Federation.
The year turned out really well, considering what we thought it would be a year ago. It's a tale of two halves of the year. The first part of the year really lagged in Asia. Now, we were doing well in Latin America as a whole on U.S. beef, but Asia was lagging in the first half of the year. But the second half of the year, especially the fourth quarter, we saw a real rebound in markets like Japan in particular, Korea as well, Taiwan, et cetera. So I think that's the silver lining on the beef side, is that it started off just being Latin America early in the year, but we got to the end of the year and we're seeing even Asia rebound, especially on the food service side. with tourism booming in many of these countries. That's a big change from the last 3 or 4 years.
And this past week, Mexico repealed its ban on genetically modified corn. It's a big win for Nebraska corn growers. As one of the nation's leading corn-producing states, Nebraska farmers were in the direct line of fire on this proposed ban. Mexico also remains Nebraska's largest whole export customer, importing $284 million, or 93% of Nebraska's total corn exports.
Really a great win for all agriculture, but beyond agriculture, great win for science-based reasoning.
U.S. farmers begin 2025 with an optimistic outlook. The Purdue Ag Economy Barometer rose in January. It's linked to higher crop prices between December and mid-January, with fewer producers citing crop and livestock prices as a top concern, and optimism about the future is even stronger. Though it's uncertain if this optimism will lead to more farm machinery or new construction investments, clearly there are clouds on the horizon. More farmers reported challenges paying off operating loans, and 40% said a trade war is likely. Some farmers and ranchers in Nebraska receiving cash back. Farm Credit Services of America issuing $147.7 million in cashback dividends returned as part of the financial cooperative's patronage program, paying 1% back as a cashback dividend. Eligible customer owners were issued cashback dividend checks the last week of January. And ag leaders are honored. The Nebraska Agribusiness Association honored industry leaders at its annual convention. Chris Proctor of Nebraska Extension awarded the 2024 Association Industry Partner Award. Dan Stork was recognized with the Award of Industry Distinction. And the Robert L. Anderson Industry Person of the Year honors Rob Clevenger of Clevenger Farm Products in Gibbon. Now to the conversation on soil health and nitrogen management. We've been reporting about the University of Nebraska's new recommendations suggesting no fall fertilizer, applying it all in season if possible. NTV's Morgan Ahlstrom has more.
I'm Morgan Ahlstrom in Lincoln, where scientists are showcasing their new tools to help farmers be more profitable while also protecting groundwater. Years of commercial fertilizer use has caused nitrate concentration in groundwater in Nebraska's central Platte River Valley. Dr. Richard Ferguson, UNL's extension soil specialist, has spent years trying to use technology to help farmers know when to apply fertilizer.
A system that has a calculation algorithm built into it. It calculates if there's a fertilizer need, how much fertilizer is needed, and controls the application in real time.
The sensors emit light onto the crops and then measure the reflectance off the canopy with photodetectors. The wavelengths measured are then used through an algorithm to translate vegetation indices into a nitrogen recommendation rate.
We started this project to encourage farmers to be familiar with this technology and to consider adopting it.
Tim Mundorf, the director of soil management at Central Valley Ag, has been using sensor technology for almost 3 years and says he's happy with the results, both agriculturally and environmentally.
Certainly with some of our nitrate issues in our drinking water here in Nebraska, we see a lot of advantage to cutting off that final nitrogen pass if we don't need it, because if the crop doesn't need it, that's going to be sitting there in the ground and liable to be leached into our groundwater in the future or lost to denitrification, which is a greenhouse gas.
The university has updated its recommendations for farmers and now encourages use of these sensor-based tools. Ferguson also has a corn nitrogen calculator on UNL's website to help with in-season nitrogen recommendations. Reporting from Lincoln, I'm Morgan Ahlstrom, NTV News.
Husker scientists help farmers across the globe, but a funding freeze may jeopardize those efforts. I'm Steve White, the university telling us some funding has been stopped. The University of Nebraska not only helps farmers and ranchers here, but university researchers help meet global challenges related to food and water. A little over a year ago, the university's Water for Food Institute received a $19 million federal grant from the U.S. Agency for International Development. The same agency now under fire by Elon Musk as part of President Trump's efforts to root out what they call fraud and corruption. The university's funding is to create a global network of organizations to improve irrigation around the world. The reason for that is to help meet the world's growing food demand. The program is focused on countries like Nepal, Ethiopia, Rwanda, Ghana, Honduras, and Guatemala, but the university now tells us the money is frozen. Senator Pete Ricketts defends efforts to rein in spending.
It is not unusual that, again, an administration is going to come in and look at what the last administration did and reevaluate whether or not it is part of their goals for what they're trying to accomplish. And whatever the grant is, if it is something that is going to be useful in helping support our national interest in the United States, I'm sure that at some point Secretary Rubio will turn that back on because it's valuable. If it's something that's not accomplishing the mission, it's not furthering our national interest, those are the types of grants that probably won't be, re-upped.
Given China's growing influence, some have said USAID is a way for the U.S. to deploy so-called soft power to advance American interests across the globe. The coach and his horse. Still to come, we pay tribute to John Cook and the story of his horse. Up next, more on tariffs. What could the impact of tariffs be on Nebraska agriculture? We visited with Mark McHargue of Nebraska Farm Bureau.
We do live in a world that our borders have been weakened and breached. And so while we are sensitive about the trade conversation, we understand as Americans that we do need to secure our borders. Now, it is frustrating that, maybe tariffs are the lever that we have to pull to do that. And so, if President Trump, seems like that is the lever he's going to pull, we need to understand the other sensitive slash unintended consequences that certainly could surround that using the leverage of tariffs as well. And so that's, those are the kind of conversations we're having.
The other reality would just economically on the farm, people need to remember, especially our row crop producers, these are challenging times. We don't necessarily need something that's going to add a new level of uncertainty to the markets right now, do we?
Will there be retaliations? And then also will Trump also find a way, if he feels like he has to use that, is he going to find a way to kind of help protect us? So those were the questions. We are at break-even scenarios right now on row crop. And so any increase in supplies, it's both sides, Steve. So it's not only the supply side, it's the sell of our products. Obviously our corn, 90% of our corn goes to Mexico. So if there's retaliation there, that's really significant. But between the two borders, they're by far our largest trading partners, Canada and Mexico.
Yeah, and when we talk about trade deficits and this and that, it's important to let people know. Agriculture can be part of that solution.
And we do have an ag trade deficit right now nationally, and we need to get that rectified. But part of the reason we are where we're at is just our conversations with China. And again, China is a bad actor. They do buy a lot of product. China has chosen to really buy a lot of their soybeans from Brazil now, and so that has that relationship, call it good or bad, has switched and has allowed a country like Brazil to kind of take our place in some of the soybean market.
This really has a real dollars and cents implications, all of this.
Well, and I know cattle, it's a couple $100 a head on cattle. I can't remember exact on hogs, $20, $30 a head. It was several dollars on soybeans. If we're at break-even scenario right now, just take soybeans, for instance, that's probably the one that could affect more. You take $2 out of the soybean market and you're at break-even. You're talking substantial money. This is real life scenarios. It's a little different for agriculture if they affect us, if they attack us directly. If I need to go buy a car and cars go up by, say, $3,000 because of the tariff, I can wait to buy a car. I can adjust some other things. Agriculture, we can't do that. We will put a crop in coming this spring in a couple of months. We will have to buy those inputs, and we will have to sell those crops at some point to somebody for a price. And that all directly affects our bottom line. And so that's the reason, again, as I started out, we are sympathetic to understanding that we need to tighten our border up. We are sympathetic to those conversations. We're sympathetic to wanting good trade deals, but it is really important how we do it, how we structure it, and how headlong in we go, and if that we need to be very purposeful on how we do use tariffs.
Our Grow Weather Outlook is next.
Well, the drought monitor that was released this past Thursday morning, and as you can imagine, with very little precipitation, still quite dry here across the Central Plains. A closer look now at the state of Kansas. 34.5% of the state now in the no drought category, actually a 0.75% improvement compared to last week's report. Means abnormally dry still stands roughly 65.5%. Moderate drought still stands, I should say now stands at 20.2%. Actually a 3.33% improvement compared to last week. Good to see that. And also good to see still no severe extreme or an exceptional drought across Kansas. Moving up to Nebraska, we have still very dry conditions in place. No drought still stands roughly 2.4% approximately. Abnormally dry, about 97.5% there. Did see a slight improvement, about 0.5% in the moderate drought category, which now stands at 88.25%. Severe drought still at 46%. Extreme drought roughly 8.36% precisely, about 0.25% deterioration compared to last week's report. Still getting drier across the panhandle, unfortunately. Otherwise, an updated February temperature outlook. A good chunk of Nebraska expecting below normal temperatures. Otherwise, the rest of Nebraska and really all of Kansas expecting closer to average temperatures for the rest of the month. Precipitation-wise, looks pretty average for both Nebraska and really all of Kansas for the rest of February. Otherwise, the next 3 months still looking at a good chunk of Nebraska featuring below normal temperatures. Otherwise, the rest of Nebraska and really all of Kansas closer to normal those temperatures will be. And the next 3 months precipitation-wise, western central parts of Nebraska and Kansas maybe slightly drier. Of course, eastern parts of Nebraska and Kansas looking closer to average totals for precipitation. Your Grow Almanac here for the week ahead. Normal high around 39, normal low stands around 18, and this week looks to be anything but normal, shall we say, especially on the colder side. 23, the average high is going to be about it, and that may be generous. And the average low at 7, that also may be generous. There will be some cold days and cold nights ahead of us here as we head throughout this next week, on top of some snow arriving for our Monday, specifically later in the day. Snow looks to be continuing again potentially Monday night into Tuesday. Also watching another chance again Tuesday night into Wednesday for the week ahead. And again, those temperatures for highs in the teens for the middle part of the week. Those lows potentially below 0 for some, although not yet. We'll have to wait and see here throughout the week. Safe to say by Valentine's Day, those temperatures do get warm, but still, I don't think there's going to be much love lost for many of us with those temperatures here this next week. It will be cold. Your Grow proverb, kind of counterintuitive. There is always one fine week in February, and I think this week will be, unless you're a fan of the cold weather, anything but fine. Hopefully later down the line, towards the end of the month, we'll be seeing a much more finer week for February. Well, that is a look at your Grow Weather Report. Stay tuned next week when once again, it's going to be time to grow.
Much of the nation remains in drought. No snow to be seen around here, and that's not just the case in Nebraska, but also for dairy producers in Wisconsin.
For one dairy farmer, it has pros and cons.
As far as the farm operations go and the snow affecting them, it's been very easy because there hasn't been snow to plow. It keeps our feed consistent. We're not adding moisture to the feed. So overall, the lack of snow hasn't been too detrimental at this point in the year yet.
Our recent roller coaster of temperatures also brings challenges for dairy farmers.
Anytime there's the big temperature swings, there's increased risk for respiratory disease in cattle.
Winter snow allows for moisture in the soil, so without it, spring planting can bring uncertainty.
We had moisture going into fall, and we'll hope for some moisture in spring. If we can catch some snow here in the next couple weeks, that would be ideal to build up the groundwater moisture.
It's still too early to tell if this winter season will have any effects on crops, such as alfalfa.
It'll be about early April before our agronomists will go out and start digging roots and see if we have any winter kill alfalfa.
Reporting in Outagamie County, meteorologist Audrey Lee, Fox 11 News.
Another Super Bowl in the books. Switching gears, though, to another champion. Nebraska volleyball coach John Cook recently announcing his retirement, riding off into the sunsets on his favorite horse.
In his office, there's a saddle, there's a rope, and there's a little whatever you post, right, that each sit there at a desk and rope. There is now one piece of volleyball memorabilia in his office. And he said, instead of giving Coach annual raises in the contract, he would like you to buy him a horse. It's just who he is. But in some ways, he's who Nebraska is. For a guy that's done what he's done, to just be as common and just want his horse, I thought was pretty cool.
And new coach Danny Busboom Kelly bringing farm roots to the job. Something about that connection between the Nebraska Cornhuskers on the farm and on the volleyball courts. Well, we'll see you back here again next time as we see how agriculture makes Nebraska grow.